Take a slow, conscious breath right now, not to escape anything, not to fix anything, but simply to arrive. Arrive in this moment where your heart is still beating on purpose and your breath is moving with an intelligence far greater than your own. Before any thought rushes in, before the mind begins its familiar inventory of concerns, there is already a quiet truth present, whispering beneath the noise, you are held. You have always been held. The very fact that you are here, listening, sensing, feeling, is evidence of a divine orchestration that has never abandoned you for a single second. Trust begins here, not as an idea you must force yourself to accept, but as a remembering of what has always been true. Worry, in its deepest form, is not really about the future. It is about forgetting who is in charge. It is the mind's attempt to play the role of God, to control outcomes, predict dangers, and manage life as though the universe were fragile and easily broken. Yet the same intelligence that causes the sun to rise without anxiety and the seasons to unfold without hesitation is the intelligence breathing you right now. When you worry, you momentarily step away from that truth and place your faith in fear instead. When you trust, you return home to the understanding that life knows what it is doing, even when your personal perspective feels small and uncertain. Every new day is not a burden to survive, but an invitation to release. Release the stories you have been rehearsing about what might go wrong. Release the old memories that keep knocking on your mind's door, demanding attention, demanding explanation, demanding emotional energy that was never meant to be spent on the past. The past has already served its purpose. It has shaped you, refined you, softened you in ways you may not yet fully appreciate. Carrying it forward like a heavy suitcase only blocks your ability to receive what this moment is offering. Trust does not mean denying what has happened. It means refusing to let yesterday dictate the peace available to you today. Notice how worry tightens the body. It shortens the breath, clenches the jaw, and contracts the heart. Trust does the opposite. Trust softens. Trust opens. Trust allows you to breathe more deeply, to stand more gently in the world, to move with a sense of cooperation rather than resistance. When you trust God more, life does not suddenly become perfect, but it becomes meaningful. Even challenges take on a different quality. They no longer feel like punishments or signs that something has gone wrong. They begin to look like invitations for growth, opportunities for expansion, lessons wrapped in difficult packaging. There is a quiet wisdom within you that already knows this. You have felt it in moments when something didn't work out the way you planned, only to later realize that it protected you from a path that would have drained your spirit. You have seen it when doors closed that you were certain you needed, only to discover that those closures redirected you towards something more aligned with who you were becoming. Trust is not blind optimism, it is informed faith. It is the understanding born from lived experience that life often knows better than the limited vision of the anxious mind. The ego thrives on worry because worry keeps it relevant. If you are constantly afraid of what might happen, the ego can remain in control, offering endless strategies, defenses, and worst-case scenarios. But the soul does not speak in fear. The soul speaks in quiet assurance. It reminds you that you are not here to micromanage the universe. You are here to participate in it, to cooperate with it, to allow yourself to be guided by something infinitely wiser than your conditioned thoughts. Letting go of worry is not weakness, it is surrender to a higher strength. Trusting God more does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means acting from inspiration rather than desperation. It means making choices from clarity instead of panic. When your actions are rooted in trust, they carry a different energy. They are cleaner, more focused, more effective. You do what you can with love and intention, and then you release the outcome. You understand that your responsibility is the effort, not the result. The result belongs to a divine intelligence that sees the entire landscape, not just the small piece visible from where you stand. As this day unfolds, you may notice the mind trying to pull you back into old habits of worry. It may present convincing arguments, reminding you of bills, responsibilities, conversations, and uncertainties. When that happens, do not fight the mind or judge yourself. Simply observe it with compassion. Say gently and firmly, I choose trust right now. Feel the shift in your body as you do. Feel how even a small moment of trust creates space, how it loosens the grip of fear and allows peace to seep back in. You are never alone in this process. The idea that you must carry everything by yourself is one of the great illusions of the ego. There is a presence moving through your life that arranges meetings, synchronizes timing, and brings support in forms you could never predict. Sometimes it arrives as a person, sometimes as an insight, sometimes as a delay that turns out to be a blessing in disguise. God is always working behind the scenes, not as a distant observer, but as an intimate partner in your becoming. Trust is your way of saying yes to that partnership. Gratitude is one of the most powerful expressions of trust. When you are grateful, even in advance, you acknowledge that something good is already in motion. You shift your attention from what is missing to what is present, from what you fear to what you appreciate. Gratitude does not deny difficulty, it reframes it. It reminds you that even within uncertainty, there is breath, there is awareness, there is life unfolding. Each of these is a gift, offered freely, without condition. Imagine for a moment what your life would feel like if you truly trusted that you are guided, not intellectually, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. Imagine waking up without immediately scanning for problems. Imagine meeting challenges with curiosity rather than dread. Imagine releasing the need to control how others behave, how events unfold, and how quickly things must happen. This is not fantasy. It is a choice available to you in each moment. Trust is not something you wait for, it is something you practice. The mind may ask, but what if something goes wrong? And the soul responds, what if something goes right in ways you cannot yet imagine? Worry always assumes a negative future. Trust opens the door to infinite possibility. When you trust God more, you align yourself with a creative force that has never run out of solutions. You stop limiting life to the size of your fears and begin allowing it to surprise you. Healing begins within this choice. Many of the burdens you carry are not caused by circumstances, but by resistance to what is. When you trust, resistance softens. You stop arguing with reality and start flowing with it. This does not mean you approve of everything that happens. It means you stop exhausting yourself by mentally fighting what already exists. In that surrender, energy returns to you. Clarity returns. Peace, which was never truly gone, becomes accessible again. Your spiritual identity is not defined by how calm you are when life is easy, but by how willing you are to trust when things feel uncertain. Faith is not proven in comfort, it is revealed in transition. And you are in a constant state of becoming, constantly invited to deepen your trust, to release another layer of fear, to remember again that you are a divine being having a human experience, not a fragile human trying to survive a hostile world. As you move through this day, let trust be your quiet companion. Let it walk with you into conversations, decisions, and moments of pause. When something triggers anxiety, let it be a signal, not a sentence. A signal to breathe, to soften, to remember who you are and whose you are. You do not need to know how everything will unfold. You only need to know that you are supported in this moment, and that is always true. Life becomes softer when you stop gripping it so tightly. It becomes lighter when you release the belief that you must carry everything alone. It becomes more meaningful when you recognize that even the ordinary moments are infused with divine presence. Trust God more, not as a rule, not as a demand, but as a loving invitation to rest in what has always been carrying you. So take another breath now, deeper this time. Feel your shoulders relax. Feel your heart open just a little more. Offer whatever worries you have, not with drama, but with humility. Place them gently into the hands of something greater than your thinking mind. Allow yourself to be guided. Allow yourself to be surprised. Allow peace to do what it does best when you stop interfering with it. This day is not an accident. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are exactly where you need to be to learn the next lesson, to receive the next insight, to open to the next blessing. Trust is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to walk forward anyway, knowing that you are never truly walking alone. And in that knowing, life meets you with grace again and again, as it always has. And as you continue listening, let yourself notice how the need to be certain has quietly loosened its grip. There is a subtle relief that comes when you stop demanding guarantees from life. The soul was never designed to live inside rigid predictions. It was created to move with trust, to dance with mystery, to grow through faith rather than control. Certainty belongs to the intellect, but peace belongs to the soul. When you choose peace, you give yourself permission to not know everything in advance, to not have all the answers neatly arranged before taking the next step. There is a sacred intelligence guiding your unfolding that does not operate on deadlines, comparisons, or fear-based urgency. It moves in perfect timing, often slower than the ego prefers, yet always more precise than the mind could ever calculate. When you worry, you rush ahead of this intelligence. When you trust, you fall back into rhythm with it. Life then stops feeling like a race to be won and begins to feel like a journey meant to be experienced, savored, and learned from. You may have been taught, subtly or directly, that vigilance is responsible, that worry proves you care, that anxiety is the price of being prepared, but this belief quietly drains your spirit. Caring does not require suffering. Preparation does not require fear. Awareness does not require tension. True responsibility arises from clarity, and clarity is born in calm. When your mind is quiet, intuition can finally be heard. When fear steps aside, guidance steps forward. Think of how nature moves. A river does not worry about the rocks ahead, it flows around them. A tree does not panic during winter, it trusts the return of spring. Everything in the natural world cooperates with life instead of resisting it. You are part of that same intelligence. Trusting God more is simply aligning yourself with the way life itself already works. It is remembering that struggle is optional, but growth is inevitable. There is an inner stillness available to you that does not depend on circumstances. It exists beneath the surface of thoughts, beneath emotional reactions, beneath old conditioning. When you rest there, even briefly, you realize that peace was never missing. It was only obscured by mental noise. Trust acts like a clearing wind, gently moving the clouds of worry so the sky of awareness can reveal itself again. You do not have to resolve your entire life today. You do not have to heal every wound or answer every question before allowing yourself to feel calm. Peace is not a reward you earn after everything is fixed. It is a foundation you choose from which healing naturally occurs. When you trust, you stop postponing peace until some imagined future and allow it to meet you here exactly as you are. There is also a quiet courage in trust. It takes strength to release the illusion of control. It takes humility to admit that something greater than your personal will is at work. Yet in that humility, you are lifted, you are supported. You are carried by a wisdom that sees beyond temporary setbacks and apparent losses. What the ego labels as failure, the soul often recognizes as redirection. Pay attention to how often life has protected you in ways you did not immediately recognize. How many times were you spared from paths that would have narrowed your spirit? How often did delays turn into blessings, endings into beginnings, disappointments into doorways? Trust grows not from blind belief, but from honest reflection on how life has already guided you, even when you resisted it. The practice of trusting God more is not dramatic, it is quiet. It happens in small, ordinary moments, choosing not to replay a fearful thought, pausing before reacting, breathing instead of tightening, listening instead of assuming. These moments accumulate. They reshape your inner landscape. Over time, the nervous system learns that it does not need to stay on alert, that it is safe to soften, that life does not require constant defense. As this trust deepens, you may notice that compassion naturally expands. When you are no longer at war with your own uncertainty, you become gentler with the uncertainty of others. Judgment fades, patience grows, and understanding replaces the need to be right. Trust does not isolate you. It connects you. It dissolves the illusion of separation and reminds you that everyone is navigating their own lessons, guided by the same underlying intelligence. You begin to sense that your worth has never been dependent on outcomes. You are not more valuable when things go well, nor less valuable when they fall apart. Your value is intrinsic, rooted in being itself. Trust allows you to rest in that truth. It frees you from constantly proving yourself, fixing yourself, or earning your place in the world. You already belong. And so you walk forward now with a lighter step, not because you know exactly where the path leads, but because you trust the ground beneath you. You listen more closely to the quiet nudges of intuition. You allow moments of silence to guide you as much as moments of action. You begin to understand that surrender is not giving up on life. It is giving up the struggle against it. Each breath becomes a reminder that you are supported. Each pause becomes an opening for grace. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to practice trust rather than fear. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, worry loses its authority over you. It may still visit, but it no longer rules. Trust takes its place, not loudly, not forcefully, but with a steady presence that feels like coming home. Stay here in this awareness. Let it settle into you. Let it become familiar. This is not something new you must acquire. It is something ancient you are remembering. Trust God more. And notice how life responds, not by removing every challenge, but by meeting you with strength, insight, and peace that were always waiting for your permission to enter. And in this remembering, something subtle yet profound begins to shift. You realize that trust is not a destination you arrive at once and for all, but a living relationship you nurture moment by moment. Each time fear arises and you choose gentleness instead, that relationship deepens. Each time the mind demands proof and you respond with patience, trust takes root more firmly in your awareness. It is not loud or dramatic. It grows quietly, like roots extending into rich soil, unseen yet steadily strengthening everything above the surface. There is a tenderness that comes with this way of living. You stop bracing yourself against life as though it were an adversary. You stop waking up with an invisible armor of tension wrapped around your thoughts. Instead, you meet the day with an openness that says, I am willing to be guided. This willingness is powerful. It signals to life that you are ready to cooperate rather than compete, to listen rather than insist. And life, in its infinite responsiveness, meets that willingness with support that often arrives just when it is needed most. You may notice that when you trust, your inner dialogue softens. The harsh voice that once questioned every choice and predicted every possible mistake begins to lose its urgency. In its place emerges a quieter voice, one that does not shout but simply knows. This voice does not rush you. It does not shame you. It speaks in feelings, in subtle impressions, in moments of calm clarity that arrive when you stop forcing answers. This is the voice of alignment, the voice that has been with you long before you learn to doubt yourself. Trust also changes how you experience time. Worry pulls you relentlessly into an imagined future, while regret drags you back into a fixed past. Trust anchors you here, and here is where life actually happens. Here is where breath moves, where choices are made, where love can be felt. When you live from trust, the present moment stops feeling like a narrow bridge you must rush across and becomes a wide, welcoming space you can inhabit fully. In this space, you begin to see that many of your fears were never about reality itself, but about stories layered on top of it. Stories inherited, learned, repeated, until they felt like truth. Trust gently dissolves these stories, not by arguing with them, but by revealing something deeper underneath. You discover that beneath fear, there is always a desire for safety, for belonging, for peace. And beneath those desires is an unchanging presence that has always been safe, always been whole. As you rest more often in this presence, life feels less like a series of problems to solve and more like a conversation to participate in. You listen for meaning rather than control. You respond rather than react. Even when circumstances challenge you, there is a sense that you are not being singled out or punished. You are being invited to grow in awareness, to expand beyond an old way of seeing yourself in the world. Trust does not eliminate uncertainty, but it transforms your relationship with it. Uncertainty becomes fertile ground rather than a threat. It becomes the space where new possibilities can emerge, where creativity can breathe, where grace can enter. When everything is already decided, there is no room for surprise. Trust keeps the door open. You may also notice that as worry loosens its grip, your body begins to respond, the shoulders soften, the breath deepens. The nervous system learns that it does not need to stay on constant alert. This is not just a mental shift, it is a physical one. Your entire being starts to remember what safety feels like. Healing happens naturally when the body believes it is no longer under threat. There will still be moments when old habits return. The mind may tighten again. Fear may speak with urgency. When this happens, treat yourself with kindness. Trust is not about perfection, it is about return. Each time you notice you have wandered into worry, you are given another opportunity to come back to presence, back to faith, back to the quiet, knowing that you are guided. And so the journey continues, not towards some distant ideal, but deeper into what is already here. Trust becomes less something you do and more something you live from. It informs how you speak, how you listen, how you rest, how you move through the unknown. Life begins to feel less like something happening to you and more like something happening with you. Stay with this unfolding. Let it move at its own pace. You do not need to hurry trust, and you do not need to prove it. Simply allow it to shape you gently, patiently, from the inside out. In doing so, you discover that the peace you were seeking has never been outside of you. It has always been waiting quietly, faithfully, for you to remember that you were never meant to walk this path alone. And now, as this inner landscape settles, there is nothing left to chase and nothing left to defend. You are no longer leaning into the future for reassurance or reaching backward for explanations. You are simply here, breathing in the quiet intelligence of life as it moves through you. This is where trust becomes real, not as a belief, not as a spiritual concept, but as a felt sense of belonging to something vast, benevolent, and unfailingly present. There is a sacred simplicity in this awareness. You begin to see that life has never asked you to be perfect, only present. It has never required you to have all the answers, only the willingness to listen. The moment you stop negotiating with fear, peace steps forward effortlessly. It does not need to be invited loudly. It arrives softly, like dawn light filling a room that was never truly dark. You may feel a gentle humility rising now, not the kind that diminishes you, but the kind that frees you. The humility of knowing that you are guided allows you to relax into your humanity. You no longer need to hold yourself together so tightly. You can let life support you, correct you, redirect you, and even surprise you. Trust does not strip you of your power. It aligns you with a power that was never separate from you. In this alignment, you realize that every breath is a quiet prayer, every moment an opportunity to choose faith over fear. You do not need to ask loudly for guidance. Guidance is already responding to your openness. You do not need to demand peace. Peace emerges naturally when resistance fades. This is the miracle that happens not through effort, but through allowance. Notice how stillness feels now. It is not empty. It is alive. It is full of subtle reassurance, as though life itself is whispering, you are safe to be here. You are safe to trust. And in this stillness, you sense that whatever unfolds next will be met with exactly what you need, not always what you expect, but always what serves your awakening. You are learning, gently and patiently, that letting go does not mean losing anything essential. What falls away are illusions, false responsibilities, imagined threats, inherited fears that were never yours to carry. What remains is clarity. What remains is presence. What remains is love, steady and unshaken, moving through you as you move through the world. As this understanding deepens, your life begins to reflect it in quiet ways. You respond instead of react. You pause instead of panic. You listen inwardly before reaching outward. And when challenges arise, as they inevitably will, you meet them not as signs of failure, but as invitations to remember who you are. Each challenge becomes a doorway back to trust. There is nothing you need to add to yourself to deserve this peace. You do not need to become someone else. You do not need to fix your past or control your future. You only need to remain willing to stay open, to stay present, to stay aligned with the truth that you are supported beyond measure. So let this moment seal itself gently within you, not as an ending, but as a continuation. Carry this softness into your next breath, your next step, your next interaction. Let trust guide your movements the way a quiet compass guides a traveler who no longer doubts the direction of home. Life is not asking you to worry less by force. It is inviting you to trust more by choice. And each time you choose trust, you return to yourself. You return to the knowing that you are never alone, never abandoned, never without guidance. You are part of something exquisitely intelligent, endlessly patient, and deeply loving. Remain here in this awareness as you move forward. Let peace walk with you. Let trust breathe through you. And allow the quiet certainty to settle fully now that all is well, not because everything is perfect, but because you are held, guided, and deeply, irrevocably connected to the source of life itself. There comes a quiet moment in every life, sometimes whispered in the stillness before sleep, sometimes announced through exhaustion or heartbreak, when the soul leans forward and asks a question the mind cannot answer. What if I have been holding on to something that was never meant to be carried? Not a thing you can point to, not a person you can name, but a way of seeing, a posture of the heart, a habit of believing that life must bend in order for you to be at peace. And in that moment, if you listen closely, you will feel a gentle invitation, not to fight harder or strive more aggressively, but to soften, to loosen your grip, to allow something ancient and wise within you to step forward and say, you can rest now. Most of our suffering does not come from what happens to us. It comes from the stories we insist on telling about what happens to us. It comes from the illusions we mistake for truth, the belief that we are separate, that we are lacking, that our worth must be earned, that happiness is somewhere ahead, just beyond the next achievement, the next approval, the next victory. These illusions feel solid because they have been rehearsed for so long. They feel familiar because they were learned early, absorbed quietly, from a world that taught us to measure ourselves against one another, to fear loss, to cling to certainty, to control outcomes as if life were a negotiation rather than a living, breathing mystery. And yet, beneath all of that conditioning, beneath the noise of expectation and comparison, there is something in you that has never been damaged, never been diminished, never been in need of improvement. There is an awareness within you that simply is watching the drama of the world with calm curiosity, knowing without effort that you belong. This awareness does not rush, it does not demand, it does not cling. It observes, and in observing, it understands. This is the part of you that knows the truth, that letting go is not a loss, but a return. We cling because we are afraid. We cling to relationships, identities, roles, beliefs, outcomes, because we have been taught subtly and persistently that without them we will disappear, that without control we will be unsafe, that without certainty we will fall apart. But notice something quietly revolutionary. Everything you have ever truly needed to survive a difficult moment has already arisen within you. The breath has come back. The heart has continued to beat. The sun has risen again. Life has carried you again and again, even when your mind was convinced it could not. Letting go, then, is not about abandoning responsibility or withdrawing from life. It is about releasing the illusion that you were ever meant to micromanage the universe. It is about trusting that there is an intelligence moving through you and around you that does not require your attention to function. When you stop gripping the wheel so tightly, you discover that the road has always known where it is going. The ego will resist this truth. The ego thrives on control because control gives it a sense of importance. The ego says, if I am not managing this, I am nothing. It says, if I let go, something terrible will happen. But the ego is not who you are. It is something you experience. It is a collection of thoughts, habits, memories, and fears that have been mistaken for identity. When you observe it, instead of obeying it, its power softens. When you stop arguing with life, the ego loses its primary fuel, resistance. You begin to notice how often your pain is fueled not by reality, but by your refusal to accept reality as it is. You replay conversations that are over. You resist moments that have already arrived. You argue with facts. You wish the past had unfolded differently, or you demand that the future behave according to your preferences. And in doing so, you miss the only place where peace has ever existed, right here, right now, exactly as this moment is. The present moment does not ask you to fix it. It asks you to inhabit it. It asks you to bring your attention fully into what is, without the commentary, without the judgment, without the constant internal negotiation. When you do this, even briefly, you may feel a subtle shift, a quiet easing as though something heavy has been set down. That heaviness was never life itself. It was your resistance to life. Letting go is the willingness to stop insisting that life should be different in order for you to be whole. It is the understanding that peace is not a reward granted after conditions improve. It is a choice made regardless of conditions. This does not mean you stop growing or creating or dreaming. It means your sense of worth and safety is no longer held hostage by outcomes. You act from inspiration rather than fear, from alignment rather than desperation. When you let go of attachment to how things should be, you open yourself to how they are. And in that openness, something extraordinary happens. You become available to grace. Solutions arise without force. Insights arrive without struggle. Relationships soften. You find yourself responding rather than reacting, listening rather than defending, allowing rather than controlling. Life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a conversation, one in which you are finally listening. Forgiveness naturally follows this letting go, not as a moral obligation, but as an act of self-liberation. You forgive not because others deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Holding resentment is like gripping a burning coal with the intention of throwing it later. The only one being burned is you. When you release resentment, you are not condoning harm. You are refusing to carry it any longer. You are choosing freedom over familiarity. As you let go of the need to be right, the need to be validated, the need to be in control, you begin to sense a deeper identity emerging, one that is not threatened by disagreement, not diminished by loss, not inflated by praise. This identity is rooted in being rather than having, in presence rather than performance. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are connected to something vast and benevolent, something that cannot be taken away. You realize then that happiness has never been hiding in a future scenario. It has been waiting patiently in the space between your thoughts, in the pauses you rush past, in the moments you label as ordinary. When the mind stops chasing, the heart remembers. It remembers how to appreciate without possessing, how to love without clinging, how to trust without guarantees. Letting go does not make you passive, it makes you powerful in a way the ego never could. You become responsive instead of reactive, creative instead of compulsive, compassionate instead of defensive. You stop asking, what can I get from this moment? And begin asking, what can I bring to this moment? And paradoxically, when you stop grasping, life seems to offer more. There is a profound freedom in realizing that you do not need to prove your worth. You do not need to earn your right to exist. You do not need to control every outcome to be safe. You are already enough, not because you have achieved something, but because you are an expression of life itself. The same intelligence that moves the stars and grows the trees is breathing through you right now. You do not need to strain to be worthy of it. You already are. As you continue to release illusions about who you are, about what you need, about how life must unfold, you may notice moments of fear arise. This is natural. The ego fears dissolution. When fear appears, meet it with kindness rather than judgment. Say to yourself, this too can be allowed. Fear softens when it is not resisted. It loses its grip when it is met with awareness instead of panic. Over time, letting go becomes less of an effort and more of a way of being. You notice when you are tightening, when you are gripping, when you are arguing with reality, and you gently return to the breath, to the body, to the present. You remember that you are not here to dominate life, but to participate in it. You are not here to conquer the moment, but to experience it. And in this experience, something deeply healing unfolds. The nervous system relaxes. The heart opens. The mind quiets. You begin to feel supported rather than alone, guided rather than lost. You sense that life is not happening to you, but for you, unfolding in ways that the limited perspective of the ego could never fully predict or control. This is the freedom of letting go, not a dramatic renunciation, not an escape from responsibility, but a subtle, courageous willingness to trust. Trust that you are held, trust that you are guided, trust that you can meet each moment as it arrives, with openness rather than resistance, with curiosity rather than fear. When you live this way, peace is no longer fragile. It is not dependent on perfect circumstances or constant success. It becomes a quiet undercurrent, steady and reliable, flowing beneath the changing surface of life. You still feel joy and sadness, gain and loss, connection and separation, but you are no longer defined by them. You move through them with grace, knowing they are visitors, not rulers. And perhaps the deepest realization of all is this: you were never meant to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You were meant to experience it, to learn from it, to love within it, and then to release it again and again, moment by moment. In letting go, you do not lose yourself. You find yourself whole, present, and free, living beyond illusions, anchored in a peace that has been within you all along. And as you continue walking this quieter path, you may begin to notice something subtle yet profoundly reassuring. Life does not collapse when you stop forcing it. The sky does not fall when you stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios. The world does not abandon you when you step out of the exhausting role of constant vigilance. Instead, something gentler takes over. A rhythm you did not invent begins to carry you. You start to feel that you are being lived by life itself rather than struggling to live life correctly. This is where true trust is born, not as a concept, not as a belief you repeat to calm yourself, but as an embodied knowing. Trust arises when you see, again and again, that the moment meets you when you meet it, that you do not need to pre-suffer in order to prepare. That clarity often comes after action, not before it. The soul does not ask for guarantees, it asks for presence. It asks you to show up with sincerity, with openness, with a willingness to be guided rather than driven. When you let go of the demand to know how everything will unfold, you give life permission to surprise you. You begin to see that uncertainty is not a threat, but a doorway. It is the space in which creativity breathes, where intuition can speak without being interrupted by fear. The unknown becomes less of an enemy and more of a collaborator, inviting you into experiences that the small, anxious mind could never have planned. There is a tenderness that emerges here, a softness toward yourself and others. You stop measuring your progress against invisible standards. You stop asking whether you are ahead or behind. You begin to sense that life is not a race with checkpoints, but a landscape to be explored. Some days are wide and luminous. Others are quiet and inward. None of them are mistakes. Each carries its own intelligence, its own invitation. You may notice that compassion deepens naturally when you are no longer defending an identity. Without the need to protect an image of who you think you are, you become more available to who others actually are. You listen more fully. You judge less quickly. You recognize familiar fears moving through different faces. And in that recognition, separation softens. You realize that much of what you once took personally was never personal at all. It was simply the echo of unmet needs, old wounds, and unexamined beliefs passing through human form. This is where service replaces struggle. Not service as self-sacrifice, but service as expression. You give because giving feels like alignment, not obligation. You contribute because it is natural to let what flows into you flow outward again. Like a river that does not cling to its water, you discover that abundance increases when circulation is allowed. What you withhold stagnates. What you trust moves. There is also a deep humility in letting go, an understanding that you do not need to be the author of everything in your life. You are a participant in something vast, intelligent, and deeply benevolent. This humility does not diminish you, it frees you. It releases you from the burden of omnipotence, from the quiet arrogance of believing that everything rests on your shoulders. You begin to rest into cooperation with life rather than competition against it. As this way of being settles in, the inner dialogue softens. The mind becomes a useful instrument rather than a relentless narrator. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer dominate. They pass like clouds across a wide sky of awareness. In the space between them, you feel yourself more clearly, not as a role, not as a history, not as a collection of achievements or regrets, but as a living presence, alert and at ease. You start to understand that peace is not the absence of movement, but the absence of resistance to movement. Life continues to change, to ask things of you, to stretch you into new forms. But you are no longer bracing against it. You bend where bending is needed. You stand firm where integrity calls for it. And you trust yourself to know the difference, not through overthinking, but through listening. This listening is a sacred act. It requires patience. It requires silence. It asks you to turn down the volume of external demands so you can hear the quieter guidance within. And when you do, you may find that the voice of the soul does not shout. It does not argue. It simply points gently, persistently, toward what feels expansive, honest, and alive. There is a joy that arises here that is not dependent on excitement, a contentment that does not need applause, a sense of belonging that is not tied to being chosen or approved. You belong because you are here, because you are breathing, because you are part of the same unfolding that moves through every form of life. Nothing extra is required. And so you continue not with rigid certainty, but with open-hearted curiosity. You allow life to reveal itself one moment at a time. You let go of the fantasy that control will bring safety, and you discover instead that presence brings peace. You stop living as if something essential is missing, and you begin living from the quiet truth that nothing ever was. This is the deeper freedom, living beyond illusions, beyond fear, beyond the endless chase for completion. It is the freedom of being fully here, fully alive, and gently unattached to outcomes. A freedom that does not need to be defended. A freedom that simply is waiting patiently for you to notice that it has always been your natural state. And as this freedom settles more deeply into your way of being, you may notice a quiet courage awakening within you, a courage that does not announce itself, that does not posture or prove, but simply stands present when life asks something real of you. This courage is born not from certainty, but from surrender. It comes from knowing that whatever arises, you will meet it as you are, not as who you think you should be. You stop armoring yourself against possibility, and instead, you allow yourself to be touched by it. You begin to see how much energy was once spent resisting emotions, pushing away sadness, clinging to joy, fearing uncertainty, avoiding discomfort, and now something has shifted. Feelings are allowed to move through you like weather across an open field. You no longer mistake them for identity. You do not say, "I am broken." You say, "Something tender is moving through me." You do not say, "I am afraid." You say, "Fear is visiting, and I can remain present with it." In this spaciousness, emotions complete themselves. They arrive, deliver their message, and leave. Nothing needs to be suppressed. Nothing needs to be dramatized. This is how healing actually happens, not through force or analysis alone, but through permission. Through the radical acceptance of what is arising without the added violence of judgment. When you stop fighting your inner life, it stops fighting you. The body relaxes, the heart opens. The mind learns to trust silence again. And in that trust, an old wisdom resurfaces, the wisdom that knows you were never meant to be flawless, only whole. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means inclusion. It means allowing every part of yourself a seat at the table, the confident and the uncertain, the joyful and the grieving, the part that knows and the part that is still learning. Nothing is exiled. Nothing is rejected. And in this inclusion, the need to control dissolves even further, because control is always born from fear of what we refuse to face.